called John Locke and Berkeley. What's his name? Berkeley. Okay, his name's Berkeley. Bishop Berkeley, George Berkeley. Okay, and let's just have a quick recap with these two competing theories in mind. So I want to hear from you guys. Okay, by way of recollection, let's remember empiricism. Michael.
Oh God! One of them is doesn't like the senses. The other one is does like the senses.
Sort of, yeah, loosely. So empiricism says all knowledge is gained through the senses. Yep. Okay. Whereas rationalism says not all knowledge is gained through the senses. We can gain knowledge through the senses, but we can also gain knowledge through other means. Okay. So then let's talk about these two. Maybe before that, let's jump back a bit. Who can tell me one of the rationalist philosophers who's commonly associated with rationalism? All right. Descartes. Yes, and his whole experiment, right, is we can doubt our senses, therefore we need something rational to underpin it. Okay, so that's Descartes. Who can tell me someone who's an empiricist? We've talked about some of these guys. David. Yeah. Hume. Very good. David Hume, an advocate for empiricism. So today we're going to look at two other advocates for empiricism. That's Locke and Berkeley. Spelt Berkeley, pronounced Berkeley. All right. So let's look at these two ways that we can think of how our senses tell us about the world. All right. So one might be when you make an observation about the world, you see the table, you see it exactly as it is. All right. That your sense organs directly correspond to reality. Okay. Another perspective might be they give you an approximate indication of reality. Okay, so I'm going to quiz you guys on a second on where you think you belong, right? Because these are mutually exclusive. The first one says, what you see directly corresponds to reality. That's the exact way that it is. And the other one, indirect, what you see is indicative of reality, but you don't see everything, right? You don't see all properties or parts, all qualities of it. Okay, who would say, out of these two, they're more inclined to believe indirect realism? Me too. All right, isn't that interesting? We all agree with that. We all sort of think, no, obviously there's some things that I can't see and observe about the world. So tell me why. Let's look for a justification. Who can tell me why or what evidence do we have that our sense organs don't tell us the way things exactly are?
Well, one example is if you're colourblind, you might see something that's the wrong colour from what it actually is.
Perfect. Okay. Yep. So colourblind. So we have disagreement about the colour that it is. Yep.
Parallax error.
Yep. So what's that?
Like when you look at something, like if you're looking at a test tube, it looks like it's high up, but it's not.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So sort of because it's in a liquid, it changes its location. Yeah. Like classic example, straw in a cup of water. Okay. So it looks like it's bent, looks like it's disconnected, but we know that it's not. You can stick your finger inside and feel that it's not. All right. So indirect realism, that's interesting. We're all an advocate of it. So John Locke said, when we consider an object, and I've got an orange that we're going to walk through in a moment, an orange, there's two fields of properties, qualities that we need to consider. There are primary and there are secondary. So for him, the primary qualities are the solidity. Okay, is it a solid object or is it a liquid or is it a gas? All right. That's something that exists in the object, okay? Extension, that means how big is it, all right? And this has a fixed shape, right? It doesn't matter what your perspective is on it, all right? It has a certain volume and a certain radius and a certain size. It has extension in space. That doesn't depend on your perception. Extension, figure, that's its shape. Motion, okay, whether it's moving or not, all right? And then the last one, how many? How many oranges do I have? I've got one, I don't have two, we've got one orange here. These are the primary qualities. But then Billy, he goes on to say, but then, if we think about these secondary qualities, that is the colour that we observe when we see it, okay? The sound it makes. Chomp, chomp. The taste that it gives. All right. He says these are secondary qualities, that these don't exist in the orange, They exist in the mind. So this is the distinction he makes. He says, primary qualities exist in the object, whereas secondary qualities exist in the mind. So some evidence that he offers in support of it. Okay? He's talking about colours and sounds and tastes existing in the mind. So which one should I go to first? Well, the first one is the orange. Okay, so we can see its solidity, its extension, its figure, its motion, how many of them they are, and we can all agree on it. But if we were to taste it, or if we were to describe the sound it makes, or the colour of it, or any of these things, okay, they're going to depend on our position. We're not all going to agree on the way it tastes. Some people might say it tastes a bit sour, some people might say it tastes a bit sweet. So it's not something, therefore, that exists in the object, says Locke, it's something that exists in our mind. Okay, another example is, okay, we've got a bucket of water in the room here, okay, and it's room temperature. Just by a side note, can you understand me? Why is it, like, if you, let's say you wash the dishes and you leave the sink full of water, okay, go away for a couple of hours, you come back and you put your hand in it and it feels cold. It's room temperature, but it feels cold. Why is that? Why would it be colder than the room temperature? Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Like you go to the laundry, there's a bucket of water, you put your hand in, it's cold. Why does it feel cold? And if you get a thermometer out, what you'll discover is it's the same temperature as the room.
Because your hands warm?
Your hands are warm, yep. Your hands are warm, but they're in contact with the atmosphere, which is the same temperature as the liquid. It's because water is a better conductor of heat, all right, than the atmosphere is. So, the atmosphere is not drawing heat away from your hand. It's not readily transferring heat from your hand to the atmosphere, but when you put it in a bucket of water, water is a good conductor of heat, so it will readily transfer. Okay, so we've got a bucket of water, it's room temperature. And we've got Michael, he's going to stick his hand in the cold esky, in a cold bucket of ice. He's reaching in there for a can of Pepsi. And then we've got Nat, who's cooking up some bacon on the stove. They're having Pepsi and bacon for breakfast. And Nat's burnt his hand on the stove, okay? So Nat's putting his hand on the hot stove. Michael's putting his hand in the ice esky. And then they both put their hand in the room temperature bucket of water. Okay, so Michael's gone from ice to room temperature. How does the water feel to you?
Probably warm.
Probably warm, right? Nat has gone from hot, burning hot plate to room temperature water. How does it feel?
Cold.
Cold, despite it having the same temperature, all right? There's an objective property that it has, its temperature, all right? That's how much thermodynamic movement that the atoms have in the liquid. So they both experience something different. So what does that tell you is that sensation is not in the water, but in their mind. All right? So this is the evidence that Locke provides for it. Okay, so let's try and talk about what might be some problems with this theory of perception, okay, of seeing an orange. What might be a problem with describing these things are primary, they exist in the object, whereas these things are secondary, they exist only in the mind, only in the subject. Any ideas to start with? What about if we were to say the critique, right? We can all look out there and see the shed, okay? And it's a big shed, all right, but it's smaller than my thumb. That old trick, it's smaller than my thumb. If I were to walk towards the shed though, it's going to get bigger. So we could throw some doubt on like this extension, whether this extension is objective or not, whether it exists in the object, okay? What's the problem with that critique though?
It's an interpretation of the object, which exists in your mind, not in the object.
Perfect. Yep. So it's an interpretation of the object, and that does depend on the perspective where you're looking at it from. But if you get your ruler out and you do measure it, okay, you will see that it does have extension and does have shape. Okay. But now we've led to the second and the more fundamental problem with Locke's theory. Okay. I can get here. I'll try and describe as best as I can. I'll try and give a bigger hint as I can. I can get my ruler out and measure it, and I can observe the measurement. And so I can say, therefore it has extension. Okay, what's the problem with that?
The ruler, like your view on the ruler.
Perfect, okay? You're still observing the ruler. All right, so that for you to say something has primary qualities, these rely on necessarily an observation that consists of fundamentally colours and the way something tastes and the way something looks. If you're looking at a ruler, you're going to see the red lines that mark out the centimetre. And so for you to say, yep, it has this fixed extension, this is necessarily dependent on the secondary qualities. That we can't. We don't have access to these primary qualities. Everything we observe is through this sort of subjective lens. Okay? So this is the conclusion that we arrive at because of that. All primary qualities are observed through subjective experience. Okay? And so what does this mean? Any objective representation of the world. Okay, who wants to finish the sentence? All right. Any objective representation of the world is first off, a subjective experience. Fundamentally, subjective experience. So what does that mean? You're going to look at the world, you're going to discover it, okay? And we're trying to paint this picture of the way the world is, the model that corresponds to the world, but it's necessarily, primarily, a subjective. It's based on sensation and experience. Okay? So that's what Locke did, and that's the contribution he made. Okay, so he made these sort of primary and secondary qualities. And then this criticism that we get here of it, he says that this is from Berkeley. He says there's a big error in your thinking. We can't separate these two because the secondary qualities, the primary qualities are informed by the secondary qualities. You can't separate them. They're all secondary qualities. And so then what does Berkeley lead to? Therefore, the physical world doesn't exist at all. All right? The only thing that exists is the world as perceived in your mind. The world as perceived. And so Berkeley's famous line, so we've got a couple of lines here, let's make another dot point, is to be perceived. Okay, so he says only things that we observe are the things that exist. If you're not observing it, it doesn't exist. So then, he's confronted with that problem. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, it doesn't make a sound. Okay, so if you're Berkeley, what would you say?
No.
No, because someone has to perceive it for it to occur. All right. What if you're a realist? That is, you suppose there is a physical world beyond your sense experience of it. You would say, yes, it does make a sound. So contrasting those two. All right, so summarise, Locke's developed that. Berkeley's offered this response, that it's necessarily subjective. And so because it's all subjective, all of reality is in the mind. Okay? So yeah, if a tree falls, any attempt to conceive. Now, Berkeley's idea can lead to, skepticism, but also solipsism. Does anyone remember what that is? Solipsism. Okay, so if you think, if everything that you're surrounded by is in the mind, what does that say from my perspective about you guys?
We're all human.
Yeah, you don't actually exist. I'm the only mind that exists, and you guys are creations of it. Okay, so that's the philosophy of solipsism. My mind is the only real mind. So that's perhaps where Berkeley's leads. One problem with this, okay, let's say you were walking along the road and you accidentally stepped in front of a truck. Okay? This is the question, all right? Do things happen and then we perceive? Or do we perceive and then things happen? What comes first? Yeah, Matt said the first one.
I agree. First one.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's not like if you think of you're walking along and the truck hits you, all right, this thing has happened, and then you've perceived it. Oh, that really hurts. Okay, the truck's hit you. This thing's happened. And so, what would this suggest about Berkeley's everything exists in the mind? To be is to be perceived.
Well, that would say, I don't reckon.
Well, it would
things
contradict
need to
it.
happen to perceive it.
Yeah, absolutely. So perhaps here we have an argument against Berkeley's radical solipsism. All right, so we'll stop the video there.